Hey guys, so this is going to be another battle report on the Dread Elf list that I've been running now and trying to optimize a bit. So now you can see that I still have the Dread Prince because I really like this guy. The Oracle on Witchcraft, I removed the Magical Heirloom, but I got a champion on the Dark Acolyte so that I have some more magic. The Cult Priest has still the same banner. The Blades of Nabh, the Goddess, with an Academy banner. They're basically to just buff the AP of the Dread Legionnaires. And then I think the Dread Legionnaires, they need some more mobility, so I put a banner of the Relentless Company on them. And then it's filled up by just Dread Judges with champions and some chariots. So these Dread Judge units, they pack quite a punch, and I would say that it's a funny unit because it hits harder than a chaff unit, but it has the point cost of an expensive chaff unit. So I would expect in most games to lose at least half of these units. But yeah, you're keeping your points in your Dread Legionnaires together with your Dread Prince. So I would say that the list is still quite able to get decent scores at tournaments. And then for my opponent's list, I specifically asked him not to bring too many chariots and not to bring a full gun line. Because, well, we kind of already saw that in an earlier battle report. And it's maybe, I would say that it counters the army quite well. So yeah, he came up with this army list. So it's an Empire of Sun style cavalry army, led by a knight commander on a horse. So basically, he has the cheap option of the Light of Sun style with the Titanic Might cavalry pick. And then it's supported by a Wizard Master Cosmology on an Arcane Engine. So I think that he had the advantage that I don't have any ranged damage output, because otherwise this Arcane Engine is going to go down pretty quickly, and then you lose your entire magic phase. So you could hide behind the Knights of the Sun Griffin, but that makes your army a very passive army. So then you would play much more into the draw, basically. So it does feature these two units of 10 Riders. And me and my opponent discussed this before. They are interesting units, but they do make you have to take the first turn. Just because the Vanguard on this, with the first turn shooting, is so incredibly valuable that you cannot get away with not having the first turn and having your opponent decide how this is going to work out. So that does turn it into quite a binary list, I would say. Yeah, so here are some pictures of the army. So the Dread Elves, I'm just currently repainting the army, and this is still a picture with the Dread Knights in there, but everything's going to be repainted, and it's going to look awesome. And then a picture of the Empire of Sun style army. So for magic, we got the following spells. So I got Witchcraft, and as a sporting lore on my Dark Acolytes, I got the Altered Sight and Ice and Fire. My Empire opponent, well, with Cosmology, he had the 4 spells that you can see here, and he obviously has the blessings of his prelate. So then, and he has the bounce spell on the Arcane Engine, of course. So we played Dawn Assault and Spoils of War. So we made a roll for deployment, and I got to choose the table side. My opponent got to say whether he was going to go first or second. So I took the bottom left in this picture, because I wanted to put my opponent in a position where he could not first turn go on the hill on the left, and I believe that well, this position that I took was better than giving my opponent ruins, because I thought that I might be still able to go into the ruins to get some cover, and otherwise my opponent would end up in the ruins, and I'd rather not charge into them. So this is what we ended up with. My opponent dropped immediately after knowing that he could. And yeah, one small detail, he put a unit of Knightly Orders in ambush, and I put a unit, one of the Raptor Chariots in ambush. At the time I thought it was a good idea. But I hadn't taken into account how big the footprint of the entire army of my opponent actually was. So the concern that I had with the Dread Judges in ambush was that I would not be able to get to the lines of my opponent quick enough. But seeing the table, I think I should have put just 2 units of Dread Judges even into ambush. Because most likely one of them will arrive on turn 2. It'll still be able to just get to my opponent's lines away plenty of time into the battle. And the other unit might also already arrive on turn 2 or either some turn later. Worst case, I would just be able to bring it up towards one of the markers when it comes on in turn 4 or so. So in turn 5 or 6, they wouldn't have any scoring anymore, I believe. So then they couldn't anymore. But I think it would have been a better choice than what I did now. So with regards to the deployment itself, my opponent took a obvious choice of just putting the Reiters in front. Were ready to counter any deployment on my side, and I was lucky to have a wall in my deployment, so I could just hide behind the wall at the start of the battle. So in the end, I think my deployment was here quite alright, with the exception of having had 2 units of Dread Judges in the in ambush instead of the Chariot, because the Chariot could have been used quite well close to the ruins, so that it could go into the ruins and threat from there. Yeah, and then it's my opponent's first turn, so he vanguards up with the Reiter units to the positions where they can shoot. The left unit is going to be able to shoot at the Dark Acolytes without the champion, and the right unit is going to be able to shoot at the Harpies. And unfortunately in this list I don't have any troops that have a very far-reaching charge distance, such as a character on a Pegasus with also Vanguard. So that would have probably helped in this matchup particularly. But I do feel that well, you don't want to include a character like that. That's not going to be that is going to be your BSB, because you do need a BSB around your main battle line. So it's going to be a superfluous character, costing like 400 points more or less. You have to have Corsairs with Vanguard to include it into your army. So all in all, it's going to be quite an expensive character, and it does offer the army something that the rest of the army cannot get. But still, I think it's quite costly for what you get. So the alternative in my deployment would have been to have the Dark Acolytes, one of the units behind the wall, to be more in the middle to threaten a bit more the Reiters with a first turn charge, because with the hard cover my opponent would still be hitting me on 7, so that would be quite safe. Yeah, but otherwise I was quite happy with my deployment. So what you can see my opponent do is that he just moves up with his lines. So his Knights of the Sun Griffin are going to threaten my army, and generally I'm well, with most of my units I'm quite afraid of these guys. With my spear block I'm not that afraid of these guys, because if they're gonna go in, I'm gonna have about 40, well, yeah, about 40 attacks on him, wounding on or hitting on 3+ with a reroll, wounding on 4+ with AP3. So basically he's gonna get wrecked before he gets to strike. And then there's still the character that also adds something like 6 wounds or so. Yeah, so my opponent shoots with his Reiters, and the unit on the right shoots down all of the Harpies. Unfortunately, the unit on the left manages to shoot down all of the Dark Acolytes. So it's 30 shots. He hits me on a 5+ for long range, so that should have been like 10 hits, should have been 6 wounds, should have been 3 wounds on the Dark Acolytes rather than 5. So that was a bit unfortunate. And also for the Harpies, it's unfortunate that he manages to shoot down the entire unit because he only hits them on 6s. But then again, they probably would have had a panic test, and with Discipline 6, I had a big chance of not making it. He also did get a Ice and Fire onto the Witch Elves, and he hit like 11 hits and then a lot of wounds. So yeah, this first turn in damage output of my opponent is quite good for him. Fortunately for me, the mortar did not hit its target this turn, I believe. So then we go over to my first turn. So my first turn sees me declaring a charge with the Raptor Chariots onto the Riders on the left. The sooner I can get rid of these Riders, the better. So I do give my opponent the free stand and shoot here, but he hits me on 6s, he wins me on 5, so that's quite okay for me. I do pick up a wound from this, but I need an 11, I believe. If I make it, it's going to change the game. If I don't make it, it's not going to change too much because the Chariot's going to walk up anyway. And for the rest of the army, yeah, the Witch Elves are just advancing to be in the way of my opponent with regards to the shooting. And the Corsairs are holding back a bit because they cannot handle a Knight of the Sun Griffin charge. The Dread Judges, the same, the Dark Acolytes also can't really cover the distance. So I'm just buying myself a turn by just moving up with the Dread Legionnaires. And then next turn I would be able to charge into the Knights of the Sun Griffin. So in terms of magic, I do manage to just completely turn off the shooting of my opponent by casting Twisted Effigy on the unit on the right and Altered Sight on the unit on the left. So neither unit is going to be able to shoot very effectively. And that was quite impressive to me. Like, you can quite effectively shut down just the enemy shooting with this witchcraft and cosmology setup together. So, because most shooting armies usually they have a couple of blocks that can shoot, but it's not like they have 5 units of 10 crossbowmen or whatever. And yeah, combined with the fact that you still have the random movement spell, you have your own movement buffs, it really plays. It really helps with the weakness against range damage output. So my opponent, he just cautiously moves backwards. So basically he sacrifices a turn where he's not really shooting to set up for the next turn where he can shoot. And I think that this kind of shows how if you have an army that doesn't have any ranged output itself against this Empire army, you're gonna struggle a little bit more. Because these riders are just mobile enough to get away from you if you don't have any ranged output. His mortar also shoots. He wasn't really sure about the inclusion of the mortar in the list, but he just got 1 hit onto my Dread Legionnaires and he inflicted 11 wounds. That's what a mortar does on infantry, especially on resilience 3 infantry. And I believe then we just go on to my turn. So my turn sees me charging with the Dread Judges close to the ruins onto his Rider unit. And I do have to go through the ruins for this. So I'm going to take the dangerous terrain test. But he cannot afford just standing there with his Riders, because if I do come in, I'm just completely murdering this unit. So he decides to flee. Which in turn results in his Knights of the Sun Griffin on the right fleeing away. So that looked pretty good for me, and I only lost 1 Dread Judge in the process. And then otherwise I didn't have any charges, I believe. So we roll for ambush. The Raptor Chariot comes on the board. And then the Witch Elves, they move away, or the Blades of Nabh, they move away to allow the Dread Legionnaires to march forward, because I'm going to use my Banner of the Relentless Company. So I figured after the battle that it's probably better to just put a Banner of Speed on these Dread Legionnaires, because if I do cast magic anyway, now I put my Evil Eye spells mostly on the Chariot, I believe. But if I just put it twice on the Dread Legionnaires, I go to a march rate of up to 16 inches with the Banner of Speed. And I still leave the option open of charging with a movement 8 unit instead of a movement 5 one. So yeah, probably that's going to be a change in the army. But we do march up just in the face of my opponent. So basically that the charge of the Knights of the Sun Griffin into this unit is inevitable. So I did make one mistake with the advance of this unit because they moved up so far as to not be within 6 inches of my Corsairs anymore, and I only realized it later. So they should definitely have been within 6 inches, because then they do get the extra AP. Also, I didn't really think it was going to matter a lot because I already have AP2. But then again, if you pay 60 points for such a banner, then you might as well use it, right? Yeah, so then we go to Magic. I decide to put random movement onto my Dread Legionnaires to just prevent my opponent from being able to flee if I do want to charge in with my Dread Legionnaires into anything the next turn. And also to give them just any charge arc that they would like to have. And otherwise, I don't think I did a lot of magic. I give my opponent's knight unit -1 movement, I believe. Yeah, and that's about it. So one small thing to note is, like these Blades of Nabh, they are obviously in a bit of a tricky position, because they would be very likely to get charged by the knight block of my opponent. And then if he were to charge there, he would overrun to my Raptor Chariot. That also declares a charge this turn, so I didn't have any choice in that. So I tried to set up with my Dread Judge's counter charges for if my opponent does go into the Blades of Nabh. Because if he overruns, he's going to end up in the Raptor Chariot. I have 2 units of Dread Judges together with my caster on the right, ready for a counter charge if this happens. If he goes into the Blades of Nabh and he just stays there, then he's going to get charged by a Raptor Chariot the next turn. So yeah, I would say that I did set up this quite nicely. The only risk that I was aware of that I was running was that my sorceress was now in a unit where she could be targeted by shooting. But I decided to just run the risk because the odds are quite advantageous there still. My opponent decides that he wants to see what happens if you charge this amount of Knights of the Sun Griffin together with an Arcane Engine with distracting into these about 30 Dread Legionnaires left. So as you can see in the picture, I run them here 10 wide, but I'm actually of mind to put them just 8 wide in the future. It's just that I have this movement tray for 10 wide, and honestly I was just too lazy to put them 8 wide. So it's also good to just play units in formations that you don't usually do, just to see the benefit of the actual formation that you use in the tournament play. So tournaments, I would definitely just go for the 8 wide equivalent. Yeah, and then we go to the magic phase. So this would have been a very good magic phase for me to use my binding scroll to cancel out the perception of strength of my opponent. Honestly, I forgot I had a binding scroll, so I made a marker now after the battle to just include with my magic card, so that I actually have a card for a binding scroll that I can just lay down with my spells, so that I'll never forget it anymore. And then in Magic, first my opponent gives his unit +1, or my unit -1 defensive, so that he hits me on 3+. And then he casts with 4 dice Perception of Strength onto my unit, and he gets 20 on the dice, which is extremely high, and I still had 7 dice left. So I tried to dispel it with 4 dice and I didn't get it. And then the altar also used its bound spell to give me another -1 strength onto my Dread Legionnaires. And with 3 dice I didn't manage to roll an 8, so that also went through. And to make matters even worse, in the shooting phase, the mortar of my opponent shot at the Dread Judges, killed the wizard outright, even though it had like a 4+ Aegis save. Killed enough Dread Judges to make the unit panic, and the unit fled 12 inches, so it's nearly off the board. Yeah, so that string of events kind of turned the battle around. I was quite confident at this point in the battle, because we recalculated after the battle, or we just rolled what would happen if this unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin would run into these Dread Legionnaires. And obviously Empire is good at just stacking up some support, but you can just you can rely on getting like 2 buff spells on your unit, but also for me to get 2 buff spells on my unit, so it kind of should equalize out, and then with the binding scroll it shouldn't even. So if the unit would be close, or well, would be on its own, and the Knights of the Sun Griffin would go in, I think we came to like the unit killing 3 Knights of the Sun Griffin, and the character also killing like 2 of them, because he has strength 7 with AP 4 with multiple wounds 2, reroll 2 hit, hitting on 3+, wounding on 2+, with a reroll of the ones to wound. So yeah, you do 15 wounds to the unit before the unit gets to strike. But now in this scenario, with me having strength 1 on my Dread Legionnaires and only strength 5 on my Dread Prince, even though I still do have the +1 to wound, it didn't really happen, because my AP also went down to AP 0, I believe. So my opponent just is able to save his or make his armor saves mostly, so only 1 or 2 of the Knights of the Sun Griffin die. And then yeah, in this turn of his and my following turn, he manages to just grind down the Dread Legionnaires, because once these chickens, once they do get to attack, they do perform quite well indeed, because he removes like 11, 12 Dread Legionnaires a turn, I believe. So that's quite a lot, yeah. Yeah, so at this point the table is looking a bit more bleak for me, because I was planning to have my opponent run in, get slaughtered, me being able to pursue with 3d6 as I had the random movement, and then just to proceed to mop up lines basically. What now ends up happening is that I have just only small units left that are going to be able to try and chase down his shooting, but not being able to catch it. I don't have any magic support anymore, so this is going downhill incredibly quickly. I did get the chariot on the flank last turn, but my opponent also managed to charge in with the cavalry pick guys. And I was quite surprised at how well they did against this chariot. I think for 5-man knight units, this option of having knightly orders with cavalry picks for 230 points is quite good, because you strike at strength 4, you have AP 3 total, I believe, and you still keep your 1+ armor save, so that's very important there. So yeah, I think these cavalry picks are certainly worth more than just having a great weapon or a lance. Yeah, so my opponent does break my Dread Legionnaires, and he also manages to kill the Raptor Chariot that went into the side of his wizard on Arcane Engine. And basically it's just mob up time now. So he charges into the Dread Judges with his cavalry, relying on the Knight Commander to smack down sufficient of them before they get to strike. And yeah, I don't have any points of him at this point, I believe. So I do get... No, I don't believe I get any points. Let me see if I am wrong. No, I don't get any points, I believe. So yeah, this is kind of how the battle is gonna end. You can watch till to us playing it out, but not a lot is gonna happen more. So basically, it just stalled on the magic phase where my opponent got these spells through that I should have just prevented with my binding scroll. So it does show the importance of having a binding scroll. in this type of army maybe. But I think also that with the AP3 that you normally have on these guys, normally you're able to go from a 1+ armor save in the worst case of your opponent to a 4+, and there's not a lot of spells that actually decrease the amount of armor penetration that you have on your units. I believe it's just, I don't know if it's just perception of strength, but there's not a lot of them. So basically this combination of armor and perception of strength is quite unique, so I don't really have to worry about it in tournament play, I think. Except when facing a list like this, and then I do have my grinding scroll. So yeah, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing or giving likes. See you in the next one.